good morning, my dear friends. I said that in November I actually rest and don't work in the garden. Well, that's not true. It's not like that at all. Because it's time to take care of those plants that need to be prepared a bit for winter. So today's episode will be dedicated to what to do with plants so they survive the winter. I'll tell you about banana plants, ceanothus, hydrangeas, grasses, those basic plants in my garden, and what I do with them before winter. Friends, have you subscribed to this channel yet? I encourage you to do so because there are really a lot of us here already, and I know that statistics also show me that many of you watch but don't subscribe. And a subscription for an online creator is a great reward for what they do, so I encourage you to do it. Write in the comments what you do in your gardens before winter, and I'll start with this, behind this gentleman. The banana plant Musa basio, which is admired by many people in my garden. This year, I have to admit, it didn't do very well, or maybe I didn't do very well because I probably gave it too little fertilizer. It didn't grow like it did in the last 3 or 4 years. Of course, it didn't grow in height, but it multiplied a lot. What should I do with it? What should I do with a banana plant of the Musa basio variety to help it survive the winter? For the first 23 seasons, I covered it. I made little shelters for it, covered it, filled those shelters with leaves and so on. However, for several seasons now, I haven't really done anything at all. Except that during this period, when the leaves have already been a bit affected by frost, I cut the stems down to about 50 cm if it's a thick stem, and a bit lower if it's a thinner one. If it's a thinner one, someone who wants to can wrap it, for example, with white frost cloth, you can also fill that cocoon with leaves. But I don't do it that way, and it works very well for me. So now I'm getting to work, and you can see how I prune a banana plant like this. While cutting down a banana plant like this, we'll also uncover the space that's normally underneath it. The space that really comes to life until, let's say, the end of May, because that's when the banana plants start to grow, the first leaves appear, and only then is there a chance for something else to grow here. I have alliums planted here. Look, they're already very tall, about 50 cm, because it was warmer for them under these leaves. Normally crocuses also appear here, so I uncover this area. Let me invite you over here in a moment. You'll see what this trunk looks like, because usually the old one dies off and new shoots of this banana plant grow around it, and over time it moves around the garden. Of course, these aren't distances like 23 meters per season, but more like 50 centimeters. It moves. So it's worth taking these offshoots once they come up and transplanting them to a specific spot, because little clearings start to form there, and you can see that right here. My dear friends, while we're cutting down the banana trees, I'm here at my warmest flower bed between the wall of the house and the back of the garage on the south side, where I have various other plants, and I sometimes call this flower bed the Italian bed. Why? Well, because besides the banana trees, which don't grow in Italy, but I have them here, I also have, for example, a Ceanothus and Rosemary here. So I wanted to tell you right away what I do with these plants, because I know many of you asked me on Instagram when I showed these Ceanothus shrubs in bloom, what I do with them that makes them look so beautiful. Well, I don't do anything really. I don't do anything. I planted them very densely with perennials, with Italian helichrysum, which is evergreen, and oregano, which also doesn't freeze. And actually, it covers the whole bottom of the Ceanothus for me. It hasn't happened yet, and I've had it here for the third season, that it froze. It blooms, it's even grown quite nicely, so if you have such plants in warmer places where there's not a lot of wind, they'll do just fine. There's also a small rosemary right in front of me. Maybe for those who have been following my channel for a long time, you remember that right here in front of me there used to be a rosemary bush that was about 1 meter 20, almost 1 meter 30, a really big clump, but unfortunately during the winter snow fell from the roof. Somehow it unfortunately broke it right at the base, really right at the roots, and unfortunately the rosemary didn't grow back. However, I planted new rosemary plants. I don't do anything with the rosemary either, but I know that some of you, those in the colder, chillier parts of Poland, simply cover the rosemary with spruce branches, and the rosemary manages to survive as well. And look at how my 2-year-old rosemary plants look, grown from a little plant like this. The most important thing is to cover them well during the first season. If they survive the second season, you don't need to do anything with them. My dear friends, I've come to the plants that are actually found in almost every Polish garden. These are hydrangeas. I happen to have garden hydrangeas and panicle hydrangeas planted next to each other. That's why I've already mentioned many times what the difference is between them. But every year I want to remind you about it, and every year there are new people here. So I think it's helpful to talk about how I take care of garden hydrangeas and panicle hydrangeas. Exactly. Let me know if there are people here who weren't following me last year but have started following me this season. Garden hydrangea. The kind of bloom the garden hydrangea had this year, and not just in my garden, doesn't happen often in Poland. This is, of course, the result of the fact that the winters are a bit milder now. And in addition, this year, in May and at the end of April, there weren't any frosts in my area that would have caused the buds to freeze. But I have the impression that this is also thanks to what I did, and that's exactly what I'd like to tell you about now. A piece of string. Actually, you can use anything that will allow you to tie up this garden hydrangea. So, like this. We tie it up so that it's completely bound, making sure it's tight. That's the first tip. We don't remove these flowers, even though in many guides it says it would be good to trim these flowers, but only the flowers. I don't remove them because when I pull them in a bit, they actually protect the inside of the hydrangea from frost and wind. Very often, if some leaves from nearby trees appear, I throw a few of those leaves inside as well. Not too much so they don't rot, just a little bit. And I keep the hydrangea tied up like this, basically in this form, more or less until the end of February. When there's a chance of frost, I also put a white frost cloth on it, which means I basically just wrap the sides of the hydrangea and leave it like that. And look, this year it bloomed fantastically. I'm getting to work. First of all, of course, I have to tie it up here with a string. It can be a string, it can be something for tying, some plastic coated wire, or really anything you use for tying. I'm tying it up quite securely. So I pull. I'll make a little bundle out of it, but again, not so much that I break it, just like this. So that the shoots are compact, so they're together. And so that this dome that appears here at the top actually helps protect it a bit from snow and rain. And by the way, when I do it like this and then do the second part, when the frosts come, it's easier for me to putting frost cloth over it here. And that's basically all I'm doing. I don't trim these flowers. I tie up this hydrangea. Sometimes I add a bit of soil or some leaves that are around here. And I basically leave it until the end of February. Since I'm already here by the Panicle hydrangea, this is the limelight variety. I'll just say right away that personally, I don't do anything with the Panicle hydrangea before spring. Of course, if you live in colder regions of Poland, you can mound a little soil around it. We don't really cover them because they are actually completely frost resistant. I know that some people also trim these flower heads. They do a first cut, which means cutting off the flower heads because, for example, they don't like them. When there are cold winds in winter, these flower heads break off and scatter all over the garden. Personally, I love looking at those faded hydrangea flower heads covered with snow, so I don't do that. I start working with hydrangeas at the end of February, and I will definitely tell you about it. My dear friends, even though it's November, my rose pitch melba seems to have forgotten about it because it's blooming. It's not a spectacular bloom, but the scent is just like in June. I came here because I want to tell you what you can do with roses before winter. First of all, it depends on what your rose looks like and whether it's a climbing rose, like in this case, or a bedding rose. We should make sure to remove as many of the fallen leaves as possible, especially those that clearly show signs of fungal diseases. It's time to collect as many of those leaves from under the rose as possible and dispose of them. We don't put them in the compost bin because we don't want those fungal diseases to spread. We simply pack them into yard waste bags and dispose of them. Or, for example, you can't burn them. We simply dispose of them. It's best to put them out with the yard waste. And we do this regularly because, as you can see on this rose, there are leaves that are still super green, but there are also leaves where you can clearly see the diseases and they fall off regularly. My pitch melba really went wild here this year. It really produced so many shoots that half of them need to be cut out. Of course, if we have great weather, no frosts in the coming days, and nice sunshine, we can already cut out some of these shoots. But only some, and only if that weather is really going to hold. We leave the rest for spring pruning. And most importantly, all those leaves that fall, you can also run your hand over this rose because that will cause some of the leaves to simply come off. We collect them from under this rose. I'm about to get down on my knees here and pick up all these leaves so it's nice and clean here and so that diseases don't spread. The last group of plants, which just like hydrangeas are also found in many Polish gardens, these are ornamental grasses. There are really a lot of varieties of them. And in my own garden, I actually have about 16 different varieties of ornamental grasses. And I don't cut any of them in the fall. I leave them all until spring, but I do different things with them. For example, I tie them up in a certain way. And about how to prepare such grasses for winter, which ones to tie, which ones not to tie, which ones to pay special attention to, maybe cover them a little. I'll tell you about that in the next episode, and I'd love for you to watch it.